Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, I wanted to do a really quick video on this lady here, Anna Sorokin, also known as Anna Delvey. Now, Anna is fascinating to me, and the reason I think she's fascinating is because she was able to move from Europe and she's able to come to New York to hustle people. She made a decision that she was going to go to New York and hustle people. Now, this story would be a little less fascinating if she would have went any other place except New York. And the reason I say this is that New York to me comes off as a slick city. It's a fast-paced city, and the people that are natives to New York, the people that are born there, they tolerate little to no BS. So the fact that you're able to go to a place like that and you're able to run con games on people is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Now, the funny thing is, she didn't just con average everyday people on the street. She went to banks. She was able to go to one bank. She got a loan for $100,000, and it was based on some con game that she's a Harris with a $60 million trust fund. And then not only did she run that game to banks, but she also ran that game to hotels. She was able to go from one hotel to the next based on the fact, or based on the con, that she has this $60 million trust fund. And on top of that, she's able to con other people on the street in the New York socialite community to basically get extravagant trips. So I wanted to do a video on a day in the life of a hustler, Anna Sorokin. So I have here with me one of the New York indictments, or a piece of the New York indictment. Now, I'm not really familiar with court documents in New York, so somehow I ended up with two different pieces or multiple pieces of this indictment for Anna Sorokin. So this section goes on to say the defendant is charged with committing or attempting to commit 7 crimes involving 6 different victims between November 2016 and August 2017, with a total loss of approximately $275,000, which in my book is a lot of money. I'm not sure about the rest of you guys. It's a lot of money to me. So basically, this indictment is essentially charging her with fraud or the attempt to commit fraud. Defendant fraudulently represented herself to be a German Harris with approximately $60 million in assets. In support of this claim, the defendant presented City National Bank with forged bank statements. And the defendant sought a loan of approximately 25 to 35 million from Fortress Investment Group LLC, Fortress. So to me, it looks like the basic con is that she's going to these different banks and she's saying that I'm a German Harris, lend me some money. And it basically goes on that Fortress was going to either consider the loaning her the money, or they're actually trying to run a reverse con on her, because basically they say, as a prerequisite to proceed with the due diligence process, Fortress required the defendant to provide $100,000 as a good faith payment to cover Fortress legal expenses and due diligence costs. So the reason I say it's a reverse fraud, because they're telling her that we'll consider loaning you this money, where to me it seems like they may not have actually loaned it to her, but they're asking to come up with this $100,000 up front as a good faith payment. Well, how can you ask me to give you a good faith payment on money that you haven't lent me? To me, it just doesn't make sense. Or maybe they're just saying this because they want to weed her out, because they figure, she's full of it, and they were pretty much onto her. So they're saying, okay, give me $100,000. But then what she does, she goes off, and then she goes off to other banks to try to go and get this seed money so that she can go back to Fortress and get this 25 to $35 million loan. So she goes to one bank, and basically that bank, I think, let's read here, relying upon the defendant's representation as to her foreign assets, representation purportedly substantiated by forged bank documents, City National Bank allowed the defendant to overdraft her account by $100,000. So whereas Fortress didn't go for the con, basically City National Bank fell for it. So in my mind, why in the world would you ask them for just 100,000 when you could have just asked for the money that you intended to con the first bank with? Because it seems like they were game, right? So they allow her to overdraft her account by $100,000. So to be honest with you, none of this makes any sense to me because anytime I go to a bank, they checking everything, right? They're going to do a background check. They're doing credit checks. They're leaving no stone unturned when it comes down to giving me money. So I'm trying to figure out how in the world they allowed this chick to overdraft her account by $100,000. I mean, did she like run a voodoo spell on them? I mean, like, explain it to me because I just don't understand it. So basically, I kind of skipped through a lot of the stuff in order to make this video short. So I did read it, but I just kind of skimmed out the good parts or kind of like picked the good parts of this document. And faced with substantial bill from Howard 11, this is one of the hotels she was staying at, where she was living beginning on April 11, 2017. The defendant deposited $160,000 in bad checks into her Citibank account and transferred $70,000 from the account before the checks were returned, including a $30,000 wire transfer to Howard 11. So again, I just don't understand these banks. Is it because, and I'm going to say this, forgive me for saying this, is it because she's white, they look at her and the way she's dressed? You've seen some of the photos early in this video. She looks a little, she looks like she could have money. She looks like she probably comes from money. So maybe based on how she represented herself, or basically how she presented herself, how she spoke, and how she ran this con game, I don't know. It seems like they were willing to constantly give her money, or at least different banks were constantly willing to give her money without any background checks, without doing any due diligence. Because I'm assuming they didn't do a background check and due diligence, because if they had, they would have found out she didn't have any money. So, but yet they're willing to constantly give this woman money time after time. I just don't understand it. Then it goes on to say the defendant offered to take a friend on an all expense paid trip to Morocco. Having informed the friend that she was a substantial trust fund in Germany at her disposal, the defendant took a luxury villa in Marrakesh, complete with 3 bedrooms, a private swimming pool, and a dedicated butler. When it came to time to pay, however, the defendant offered up her debit card for payment, knowing that it would be declined for lack of funds, and then pressured the friend into offering up her credit card instead. Claiming that she would pay the friend back, the friend ended up footing the bill for the entire trip, which came to approximately $62,000 for a 6-night stay. Now, I really feel bad for this friend, and obviously it's not really a friend, but I really feel bad for this person because they were actually hustled into going on this trip, which they thought was free, and then they end up paying for the entire trip, and the trip cost $62,000. To me, that is just outrageous. If you're going to hustle somebody, why? I mean, that's so much. It would probably take a lifetime for the average Joe Blow to pay that off. Like, I don't know the person's situation. I don't know how much money they make, but $62,000 is a lot of money. And I really feel bad for the person that fell for the con. She's coming to them saying, hey, you know what? I want to show my appreciation for your friendship. I'm a trust fund Harris. Let me take you to Morocco. Don't worry about paying for it. Don't worry about any of the expenses. I'll cover all that. I'm a German Harris. I have a trust fund in Germany. Just come along. I just want to show you a nice time. Now, I have read other articles, and I think part of her con, in order to get the person to buy into it, is that she courted the person for an extremely long time. I think at some events she took them out to dinner, and other events she took them out for drinks. And the places that she took this person were kind of extravagant, high-end places. It's not like she's taking them to Burger King. She's taking it to places where, a drink is like, $100, so on and so forth. So she basically ran the con on the person, whereby she's given a lot of stuff up front for free to establish this image that, she's this high-end person, only later to hit them in the rear end with a $62,000 bill. So that's basically it with this lawsuit. Like, I'm sorry, here we go. On August 17th and the 21st, 2017, the defendant posited two bad checks worth 15,000 into Signature Bank account under her control. Over the next few days, the defendant withdrew approximately 8,000 in cash before the checks were returned. So again, with the banks, I really cannot understand how these banks are allowing this scam to continue, whereby you deposit a bad check to yourself into your account, and before that check clears, you're able to withdraw that money. I'm sorry, but the banks just don't give me that type of privilege. It just doesn't make sense. It's how she's able to swindle banks, because they're supposed to be trained professionals, and they're supposed to be able to weed out scams like this. So that's basically it for this section of the lawsuit. I'm going to continue on in the next screen with the other section of the lawsuit.